Welcome, everyone. We'll give it just a moment for everyone to make it into the webinar, and then we'll get started. We appreciate you joining us today. And just to put it out there, this will be recorded. This session will be recorded and be available to all registrants after the event, and we'll also include it on our website for people to watch at a later date. Okay, I think we're gonna kick things off. So welcome everyone. My name is Tony Phelan and I'm a program manager for MBA programs at Forte. So thank you so much for joining us today for Conquer Your Career Human Resources. This event is part of Forte's Conquer Your Career virtual series, which offers an inside look at what it's like to be a woman with an MBA working in various fields and industries. So we will get started. Human resource professionals play an important role in driving company growth and success. In fact, human resources offers a variety of unique career paths that can make both an impact on organizations and the people that work there, like recruitment, retention, compensation and benefits, learning and development. There's so many different areas within human resources to learn about. So today we're going to learn from some women leaders in this field who have found their fit in this business function. These MBA alums will share their experiences and discuss the knowledge, skills, and abilities that can help launch someone into this career path. So let's get started by meeting our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce you to Liz Hakes. Liz, let's hear a little bit about you.
Yes, hi, hello everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are tuning in from. Like Tony said, my name is Liz Hakes. It says Hakes like lakes, but with an H. And I am originally from the Boston area, but then spent 10 years in Chicago for undergrad, and then what I call my first career in nonprofit management. I was actually in fundraising for a very rapidly growing nonprofit organization. I think what I figured out is that I really loved thinking about what the strategy of the organization was and connecting it into the resources, the systems, and the right people in the right places to help that growth. And so I decided to go back to get my MBA, specifically to pursue a human resources career, because I just found that those were the things that really energized me and that I wanted to spend all of my time on, and landed at the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management to get my MBA. So that's what brought me. Today I am in the Twin Cities. I found General Mills, who, if you see a box of Cheerios, Annie's, Totino's, Pillsbury, Betty Crocker, those are some of our portfolio of brands at the grocery store. That is where I sit today, and I'm an HR business partner supporting food service business, which is food away from home. And so it's actually the business to business model that we have at General Mills. I think most of our business, again, goes through grocery stores, but we have a smaller kind of, we'll say, growth business that focuses on K-12 schools, universities, hospitals. So again, that B2B model. So I will let the other panelists share. The only other thing to know about me personally is I am a mom to an 18-month-old, and so that's been a really just rewarding part of my life since business school as well.
Love it. Thank you so much, Liz. Okay, next I'd like to introduce you to Jasmine Joda. Over to you, Jasmine.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine. I'm originally from Illinois and got my bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois with a degree in accounting, and knew I did not want to be an accountant. So I started my career at Abercrombie & Fitch doing inventory management, or essentially supply chain, and then made a quick transition to consulting at Accenture, where I served in our talent and organization and human potential practice. There, I specialized in change management, org behavior, and org design, and on really big HR transformations. Went to business school at Dartmouth College and didn't really think I would end up in HR. I kind of interviewed across the board and then just kind of saw what came back. And then did my internship at Google and returned back full time. At Tuck, I kind of held lots of different hats. I served on our student board as our diversity, equity, and inclusion chair. I was co-chair of our Black Students Association, and then also was a Tuck admissions associate. So at Google, I serve kind of in a central strat ops team in the office of the chief people officer. And so I took that role to be centrally located and to kind of be able to flex between what is our people strategy, but also how do we operationalize it for all of Google.
Very cool. Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, next I'm pleased to introduce you to Chandler Rock. Chandler, please tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to chat with you today. I am originally from North Carolina, where, similar to Liz, my first career was in nonprofit development. I was in the hunger relief area and really liked being able to tie the business and financial needs of a mission-driven organization, but I was always so curious about impacting the employee experience of that work and was involved in a lot of our early initiatives around DEI, getting to influence some of the people leadership capabilities and realized, okay, this is what I want to do full time. So I left the food bank, left the South to another very cold state, went to University of Michigan Ross School of Business, where I was really kind of whispering to folks at first, yeah, I want to go into HR. Like, yeah, that thing you see Toby in the office doing. And I left shouting from the rooftops, yes, this is what I want to do. This is a great, very impactful career. After spending my time at Ross leading our human capital club, being a career coach for folks recruiting for HR, and also just embracing the winter that was Michigan. So now I'm at Johnson & Johnson. I'm in my third and final rotation of the HR leadership development program here. So right now I'm in talent management, working on portfolio and strategy. I live in Brooklyn with my husband of 3 months, partner of 10 years, and our 2 dogs. So enjoying city life for a bit. So happy to meet you all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chandler. And last but not least, I'm going to turn it over to Katie. We'll round out our intros by hearing about you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tony. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Wanzlak. I am originally from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I graduated from Purdue University, located in West Lafayette, Indiana, in 2017. There, I actually majored in hospitality and tourism management. I was very interested in the hotel industry, event planning. So I, like similarly to a lot of people at Purdue, moved up to Chicago, where I joined Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts and their manager and training rotational program. So I started my career in operations there. It was an incredible opportunity to rotate through literally like every department in the hotel, ranging from room service to the spa, front office. So just got to see every area of the hotel. I completed the program and wanted something a little bit more stable. So I moved into catering sales, where I primarily worked in client services for social events such as weddings, bar mitzvahs. So it was really cool getting to intersect hotels with events. Hospitality was definitely impacted, as we know, during the pandemic. And I was furloughed and kind of had an opportunity to really take a step back and ask myself if this is the path I want to continue down. And I decided, I think there's something that's a better fit for me out there. Did some career exploration and decided HR was the area that I wanted to pursue. And I decided to go to Vanderbilt for my MBA, as they had a specific human and organizational performance concentration, especially coming from a career pivot background. I really wanted to have that on my resume. I completed my internship at PayPal in between my first and second years, and I ended up returning full-time after graduating. And my first year, I was in an internal HR consulting role, working between centers of excellence and HR generalists. And about 8 months ago, I transitioned into talent management center of excellence, where I work on executive succession planning, executive development, as well as talent designations. So I'm very excited to be here with you all today, especially as someone that came from kind of a non-traditional background, and to share any advice as well.
Love that. It's going to add really good perspective. Thank you, Katie. Okay, so I know we're going to have a great conversation today. We do have some panelist questions, but we will potentially have time at the end to take audience questions. So if you have questions throughout the session, anyone watching, please submit them via the Q&A feature. And then we will kind of see how much time we have at the end to get to your questions. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen here. All right. So our first question that we have for our panelists today will go to Chandler first and then Liz for this one. So I would love to know what it is about your role that excites you and that motivates you. And how did you know that human resources was the right choice for you?
Mentioned where some of my interests began in my previous role and really tapping into a lot of my passions around coaching, around tackling problems that are pretty ambiguous, but you can infuse with a lot of strategic insight. And ultimately, so in undergrad, I studied the very tangible majors of sociology and Spanish. So I come at this from a very sociological approach. And the workplace is really where we spend most of our waking hours. We have most of our conversations with our colleagues. It affects people's mental, emotional, physical health so much, which is very important to me. And I think this is such a unique career to couple sort of the art and science of everything that you learn in school and on the job. My first rotation in the HRLDP was as an HR business partner for our orthopedics R&D group. And I was so blown away with how smart my engineers and scientists and everyone were. I felt a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, what am I doing here? What do I have to offer? And it was really validating to hear them tell me they actually thought what I did was way harder. They don't know how I am able to approach problems and talent strategies the way I do. And so that affirmed that this was the right choice for me, that I get to leverage my strengths and complement others, and together we can really partner for a better employee experience.
Great, thanks. Over to you, Liz.
Yeah, I would say for me, just in terms of choosing HR as the career path, thing similar to Chandler, there's an element of like really understanding yourself and what brings you energy first, right? And so, for me, I worked for an organization that helped first generation high school students to access college, develop their leadership skills. I actually started my career as a teacher. Even before that, I realized I did not want to work in front of kids all day. But again, that like the tangible element of like, how do you help people realize their potential? And then I realized, again, working for a growing organization, I was like, I also love and I'm really good at helping organizations to realize their potential. So how can you really help both, take organizations and individuals from good to great? And so I recognized that I got a lot of energy from that. And then from there, it was talking to a lot of people. I did the Forte MBA launch program, and they were really great about just kind of almost like forcing you to go talk to people to figure out what you want to do so that you could tell a really impactful MBA story. And I would say through that process, I kind of, narrowed in on either a human capital consulting career, more similar to kind of where Jasmine started, or more of this kind of HR leadership development, internal kind of internal corporate, strategic corporate HR track. And so I think between those two paths, I think what I figured out for me is that like I really like seeing my work come all the way through. I think as a consultant, you get to see across lots of things. You get to be very strategic, but then you ultimately pull yourself out. And for better or worse, I like it, and I'm good at like actually executing and implementing the work, and I love seeing the tangible impacts of that work. And so for me, I knew that specifically being more of that strategic level HR business partner, where you got to both work with the people and the business strategy, was the space that I wanted to be. And then I would say in my role today, and I think so I started in our HR leadership development program. I only did one rotation in it and pretty quickly moved on. We have an internal job marketplace at General Mills, and so you're able to apply to roles. And so I pretty quickly applied to a central role leading onboarding and professional development for the whole company, and then transitioned into the HR business partner role that I am in today. And I would say the HR business partner role really speaks to me just because you get to work with some of the highest level executive leaders at the company and take the strategy that they're working and figure out what it means from a talent and an organizational perspective. And so just like practically what that could look like, the meeting that I just came from before this, our leaders are working or have kind of a draft version of the long range plans for our business. So for that food service business for the next 3 years, coming from that, the meeting I just came out with, it was like, what does this mean for our talent and our organization? Where do we need to go? What capabilities do we need? What will the implications of this be? And like, that was just one of the most energizing conversations I can imagine having, right? Is really being able to play at that higher level. And I think MBA set you up so well to really hang so well in that business conversation. And like, I would say a lot of my leaders, they're not like, you're the HR leader. They're just like, you're a leader at the table. And so for me, I think I've found a real kind of like sweet spot, particularly in this HR business partner generalist role.
Fantastic. It sounds like you both ended up where you're meant to be. So that is great to hear. So our next question is for Katie. Katie, could you tell us, what does a human resources role, or could a human resources role look like for an MBA grad, maybe a new grad? What are some areas that MBAs typically kind of step into post-graduation?
Yeah. Liz gave a really nice segue into this question. So for MBA grads interested in HR, there are primarily two main paths. The first is corporate HR, and the second is human capital consulting. I personally chose the corporate HR path, but both offer unique opportunities for impact depending on what you're looking for. So just to begin an overview with corporate HR, MBAs typically enter through a couple of routes, the first being a rotational program or direct placement. So many large companies, as you've heard from today, from some of the panelists, offer an HR leadership development program where you can rotate across different functions for a specific amount of time. Most commonly, these rotations include a role as an HR business partner or a generalist. So you're working closely with business leaders, and you're typically aligned to a specific segment of the business. Another type of rotation may potentially be in a center of excellence, such as talent management, where I'm in, compensation, learning and development. And furthermore, I've seen some programs that even include a rotation within the business itself, which is nice that it gives you direct exposure to a commercial strategy. Other MBAs may just go straight into one of these roles, such as an HR business partner or a COE role like talent strategy, people analytics, as well as I've seen people go into HR strategy and operations roles, such as being a chief of staff. So the corporate HR route will, in my opinion, give you kind of like the deeply embedded perspective of working with a company, and you really get to shape long-term talent strategies, as well as drive any workforce initiatives from start to finish that impact employees every day. On the other side, MBAs can also choose to go on the human capital consulting route with firms like such as Deloitte, PwC, Mercer, just to name a few, but there's plenty more, in their people and organizational practice. So these roles really do focus more on project-based work, and they advise companies on organizational design, workforce transformation, as well as maybe some more specific roles such as talent strategy, leadership development, DE&I, change management, just to name a few. So this path is really great for those who want like fast exposure to a lot of different industries. It's super fast-paced. It's very client-facing. And I would say it does require strong analytical and problem solving. And typically, maybe a little less so now because of just the impacts of COVID, but there typically is travel involved. A lot of my friends who are in that space are traveling pretty much every week for their role, depending on their project. I would just say one last thing is the key difference, in my opinion, is the level of internal versus external focus. So like in corporate HR, you're solving HR challenges for your company long term, whereas in consulting, you may be working on multiple clients on shorter engagements. So personally, I chose the corporate HR route just because I wanted to be embedded in a company culture and see projects from start to finish. But that being said, people do move in between these two paths. Some consultants transition into corporate HR leadership later in their careers. And I've also seen some people start in corporate HR and want that consulting path. So you do have some flexibility there.
That's super helpful, Katie. Thanks for that breakdown. So our next question, we're going to start with Jasmine, and then we'll go back to you, Katie. But many of the folks joining us today are currently enrolled in an MBA program, or they're potentially pursuing an advanced degree in the future. So what can attendees do during their time in business school to prepare for a career in HR? What types of courses or activities should they look at engaging in? And like I said, we'll start with Jasmine, and then we'll go to Katie.
Awesome. So as I mentioned in my intro, I kind of stumbled into HR, and Dartmouth is a generalist MBA program. So we actually don't have any like specific HR focused courses. So with that said, during my second year, when we actually do get to select electives, I focused on where did I have a deficit in skills that I knew I would need? And then where can I focus on classes that will actually give me frameworks that I can pull into everyday life? But also, I think because I already came from like a business undergrad background, so I had no interest or desire to take the extra modeling classes or to like take accounting again. So with that said, I took classes like Leading Through Disruptive Change, where I got tons of really, really helpful frameworks that I got to pull into my internship. That kind of helped me lay the groundwork for any strategies that I got to implement. I also took like a communicating with presence class that really focused on like how do you build a good story, and how do you like translate like boring business crap to like a real compelling thing to influence other people. And then I also took like a power and influence class that focused on how do you kind of like assess the organization or like the leaders that you're working with, and how do you pull different levers of influence to kind of get further to where you want to go. And then activity wise, I feel like I focused on things that got me out of my comfort zone and that kind of forced me to have difficult conversations. So similar to being an admissions associate, kind of getting the exposure to what is like the back end of recruitment, or kind of like how do you assess candidates, different things like that. Or in my role as DE&I chair, we kind of did a whole series on controversial conversations. And I think that kind of helped me in my role today, and just how do you deal with different personalities and kind of elevate what you're seeing externally and talk about it in a productive way.
Thank you, Jasmine. Over to you, Katie.
Yeah, so I would say HR is becoming increasingly more data-driven and strategic. So MBA students should really focus on that mix of traditional HR coursework, if their program has it, and also the broader business acumen as well. And like I shared earlier, I chose Vanderbilt because they had the human and organizational performance concentration, and they had a ton of classes that I knew would support me with my career pivot. Some examples of the classes I took were strategic HR management, compensation decision making, leading change, people analytics, risk and resilience in turbulent times. But I would also say focus on supplementing those with other courses such as general strategy, operations, and finance courses to really understand all facets of the business. I think the best part about the MBA experience has been those courses that maybe I'm not going to be a subject matter expert in, but I can at least understand what's going on when I'm involved in conversations with leaders from across the business. I would also say if your program has an HR student club, I would highly encourage you to join that. Student organizations, they often bring in industry speakers, networking opportunities with alums. There's been potential for attending human capital case competitions and just general like leadership opportunities, typically that you can be involved in your second year, leading the club. I think all of that transitions well into HR when you move into more of the corporate field after you graduate.
Great. I heard a little theme of trying things that maybe you're not the most comfortable with and using them as learning opportunities. So thank you both. Okay, our next question is going to be for Liz. So Liz, what companies typically hire MBAs into HR positions upon graduation? If there is a trend or certain companies, and then where should students focus their efforts during recruitment season?
I'm going to go backwards one, because I feel like there was one piece of the on-campus experience I don't want to miss, which is just the kind of extracurricular. I know Jasmine talked about a lot of her leadership involvement. I was also in student government, co-led our Women's Leadership Conference. sat on a couple and did the admissions counseling as well. And I think like those can be such great opportunities for you to really not only build, like really build leadership skills basically that will set you up so well when you enter the workforce. And again, I think of those as macro skills, not just HR skills, although I did often find that in some of those roles I was playing like the HR person with my peers. In many ways, people kind of eventually figured out to turn to me on some more of those topics. And so I would think about how you're making the most of those as well. In terms of companies, I think you have a great cross section of companies here on the call today. I know I saw a question come through in the chat of like, can you speak to if the companies you're at do have HR LDPs? I think the answer for all of us is yes. Like General Mills absolutely does. The other thing I would say is that if you are not in an MBA program yet, or you're thinking about which one you want to go to, start to get really, really tight on which MBA programs have strong human capital or HR kind of representations. I think you see a pretty good cross section here. So I know like Ross has an amazing human capital program. Same thing with Vanderbilt. When I was looking at programs, the University of Minnesota Carlson School has a really strong master's in HRIR program. And I really did my homework and research before to like figure out if I could piggyback off the recruitment for that program and some of the classes and coursework with it as well. And again, there are multiple other schools that have that. And because it is a growing and evolving space, I would say that's only growing. I know I also looked at Kellogg School of Management, which had just kind of founded their human capital program at the time. I looked at Questrom School in Boston, which had a really strong kind of like latch into some of the East Coast HR. And so just be strategic about where you go, because that will also dictate some of the companies that come to recruit at that campus. And so if you actually want companies who are coming to recruit for HR, it's best to land at one of those schools. Every company from a recruitment strategy perspective will usually have a portfolio of core schools that they go to. And so for Chandler, like J&J, they go to Ross is one of their core schools. They don't come to University of Minnesota. General Mills, we go to University of Minnesota, University of Illinois, and Utah State. And we otherwise do a virtual recruitment program to kind of catch all the other schools. And so again, you'll see differentiation from different companies in terms of where they go to campus. And that doesn't mean you can't necessarily get in. It just means that it will be easier to get in. But I would say like thematically, there are a good number of top CPG companies that have HR LDPs. So again, think Johnson & Johnson, General Mills, PepsiCo were ones that often I saw rise to the top. A lot of tech companies as well. So we talked about Google, Amazon, Cisco has a really strong one. I recruited with Microsoft as well, has a fantastic program, and then a lot more in the manufacturing space as well. So I think of Honeywell, recruited at the University of Minnesota. I recruited with Ecolab. And then, of course, there are many others. I would, invite if any of the panelists have other companies, but I would say the message is like, depending on where you geographically want to be too, that can also dictate how you choose your MBA program and how you ultimately choose kind of which company you want to be at. I knew we wanted to be in the Twin Cities because we have family here. And so this made a ton of sense. A lot of companies who are here recruit for HR LDP programs and then stay here. Versus like a Ross with a much more national reach. And you could have ended up going up a lot of different places in the country.
That's really good insight. Thank you, Liz. Jasmine, we're going to go back to you for our next question. Can you talk a little bit about what professional development looks like in human resources, and how do you make sure you're on track for promotions and making sure that you're consistently learning?
For sure. So unfortunately, Google, we actually sunset our HR rotational program for MBAs the year that I joined. But with that said, I think in general, Google's culture, it's so big, there's so much to offer, but it's kind of like a build your own adventure. And if you are not focused, you can kind of get lost in the sea. So I like to use like professional development with what already exists. So we have a great Google to Googler or G2G coaching program where you can get 6 months of dedicated like leadership, hands-on coaching support. And there you can do like action plans. For me, I wanted more exposure to what all the rest of the COEs within people operations looks like. And so we kind of like went down the gamut of like, these are the leaders that you need to know. These are their chiefs of staffs. Like, let me do warm welcomes for you. So that was super helpful for me. We also have tons of mentorship programs like the Collective that is for all Black employees, where you are put into a cohort of people in your similar level, and then you get to do a capstone kind of like meet and greet at the end. And there also we're kind of mixed in terms of functions and product areas, so also kind of got to get exposure to people in the business. And then to make sure I'm on track for promotion, I have a very painfully detailed career development plan that includes a skills assessment. So I do that first and then review that with my leader. And then also I like to ask for different like people that are a great role model at the next level above me, and then also review that career development plan with them. And then obviously revisit that plan quarterly to proactively track against that progress with my manager. And so far, everything is going well. But I think in general, it's very much so you own and drive your career, and kind of you cannot expect for other people to kind of like bring you up. But yes, welcome any other input as well.
Thanks, Jasmine. Yeah, I'm hearing themes of mentorship and being proactive. So that's great advice. Thank you. I think there's going to be a lot of people on the call that are interested in this next question. So Chandler and Katie, could you talk about how someone might facilitate a successful career pivot into human resources? We'll start with Chandler.
Thank you. I think just all the advice that everyone else has offered on this panel is so spot on. You're leaving me very motivated and focused. So to add to all of that amazing advice, I would really offer I'm a big fan of coaching. So coaching prompts to help you think about this, because there will not be a single right answer for everyone in this call. It really depends on who you are, where you want to go, and where you're starting from today. So this is the approach I took from going through my first year of my MBA, getting one whole internship offer to go into this summer, and then how I was able to move into my second year, and I had about 10 offers that I had the privilege of choosing from. So what I would prompt you to think about is, first reflecting on your goals. Ross put this in terms of what are your essential ingredients, these kind of non-negotiable components of a dream job. And I love what Jasmine said about what skills, like skills are really your currency to get to where you want to go. So what skills would you ideally want and need to have? For me in HR, I think some of those key ones are, like Katie said, are data-driven decision-making, trusted partner, strategic thinker. But once you've done that reflecting, then you can take the next step to ground yourself in reality. So where are you starting from today? I was starting from where Victoria in the chat was, with no experience whatsoever in HR, so that you can then identify, okay, what are your options to bridge that reality to the dream? What skills, again, do you want to develop? Where do you need to broaden and deepen your network? I see a lot of questions in the chat about difference between MBA versus master's in HR. I think I would bubble that down to, do you want the breadth, a really strategic thinker, or do you want the depth? So then you can really ideate, this fourth step, commit to what you want to do or what you will do and on what timeline, and really execute that plan. So for me, whenever I got my many rejections my first year, I would always ask for feedback. Typically no one answers you, but there was this amazing recruiter at Citibank, and he spent half an hour on the phone with me, and he gave me great advice to not only show I was doing a good job at communicating my interest in HR, but at that point I didn't have any ability to tell what I was capable of doing. So I did just that during my MBA, but yours can be during, post MBA. Every class project or student club leadership or event, I geared towards dipping my toe into different parts of HR with really tangible outcomes that I could point to leading. And realizing, a good friend earlier in my career taught me this mantra that I can do anything. All of you on this call, you can do anything, but I cannot do everything, not all at once. So ground myself in that reflection from earlier. What am I ideally driving towards? And just kind of put on my horse blinders to not feel FOMO of what everyone else is doing around me.
Love it. Thank you, Chandler. Katie, what would you like to add to this one?
Yeah, I think Chandler did a great job giving that overview. I would just say that like pivoting into HR can feel really daunting, but it's absolutely possible. I think just keep in mind like a lot of skills from other fields transfer really well into HR. Some examples include like project management. Like HR roles often involve leading large scale initiatives, such as myself, talent programs, or organizational change. So how can you transfer maybe your project management at your current role into what you may be doing in HR? Additionally, like stakeholder management and communication skills, if you've worked in client-facing roles, or any like type of cross-functional teams, you already have skills that HR leaders use daily. It's just really creating that story and connecting the dots for when it comes down to interviews on how this transfers. Secondly, I would just recommend taking on any HR related projects in your current role. Many business functions, if not all of them, intersect with HR. So if you work in operations, if you work in finance or strategy, you can volunteer to work on projects related to workforce planning, talent strategy, or any type of leadership development. Additionally, most companies do have employee resource groups and some types of mentor programs. So these experiences can really give you exposure into the different type of HR work and can help build your internal brand and again, help connect those dots. The only other thing that I would add, and this is one of the best pieces of advice I received before even starting my MBA program, is really to think through what your FIG is. So FIG, which is function, industry, and geography. When you're looking at those three things, like what do you want to prioritize for your career? Is it where being in HR as a function? Is it being in the tech industry? Is it where you want to be located? For me personally, I knew I wanted to work in HR, so my function was a priority. And I personally didn't want to work on the East Coast because I have family in the Midwest. So that kind of, there were some opportunities that I knew I wasn't going to be eligible for because I placed that restriction on myself. But I was much less concerned with what type of industry I wanted to be in. So kind of understanding and thinking through what are those things that you want to prioritize for your career before you even step through the door. And having that priority really helped me have clarity through the MBA program because it can be easy to be like, oh, well, all my classmates are kind of going down this pathway. Maybe I should be as well. But if you go in being super intentional with what you want, it'll make your route a little bit easier.
Thank you, Katie. I heard a theme there of between both Katie and Chandler of kind of, not being so worried about what other people are doing all the time and really focusing in on what you want and prioritizing in that way. So I love that. Liz, can you talk a little bit more? I know we've talked about this a little bit already, but can you describe more of what a long-term career path could look like for an MBA in HR?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will speak mostly from the lens of General Mills with maybe a couple touch points on other companies. I think what you'll see again across industries is that for most of us, this is relatively typical, but again, would invite any panelist to add in. But I think again, many of you would come in through one of these HR leadership development programs if you choose corporate HR versus human capital consulting. You come in, do several rotations. Different companies have different models of rotations. At General Mills, we generally do one in manufacturing, one in a corporate type role. I also see different companies make sure they rotate you through the centers of excellence, right? So that you get maybe an HR business partner experience, you get maybe a talent experience, maybe you get a comp and ben, total rewards experience. So that you would then are prepared to go into a myriad of different roles after that. And so I think that's where it gets a little bit more into like, what's the jungle gym of your career after that rotational program, where it becomes so important to do some of that career development planning that Jasmine talked about. I know we're in what we call individual development planning or IDP season at General Mills right now, which is where you take a step back and continue that reflection of what am I good at? What gives me energy? Where do I have gaps? And where do I want to go from here? And like I mentioned, at General Mills, we have an internal job marketplace up through the manager job band, which basically means that managers post open jobs internally, and then employees can apply to them, which really opens up a lot of opportunities. And so there have even been times I would say I was tempted by like a marketing role or a role in another function, but I always try and tie it back to my individual development plan. And so as you think about growing, and I'll try and hit a couple questions I saw in the chat here too. Generally, you would flex between those centers of excellence or these HR business partner roles. Some people will flip-flop in between the two of those in order to get more breadth. Some people will end up going much deeper into one of them in order to build more expertise and continue to grow in that particular space. And I've seen MBAs do both. At General Mills, I would say it's more typical. Our HR LDP is really designed to build HR business partner generalist and strategist. And so you see like all the way at the top of our organization, our CHRO came from University of Minnesota's Carlson program. At the same time, one of our most senior director who leads all of talent acquisition for the whole company has an MBA. So that's more of a deep expert role. And so you see both, but generally we're more designed for that generalist path. Once you kind of, I would say, top out at that manager level in order to make it into that more executive level, so director and vice president, the company makes those decisions for you. And so you would get kind of, we'll say, selected to get promoted to that director or to that vice president versus getting that opportunity through the internal job marketplace. We're much more closed in about how we make our executive decisions. And if you get to be a talent manager or HR business partner, you get to see behind the scenes on that process too. And when you talk about succession planning, which I think is also really fun. And so that's, I would say, just a basic overview. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. I got a couple of questions of like, do I go deep somewhere? Do I go broad somewhere? A lot of it is like, what do you truly want? I know, like, for me personally, I want to go where my strengths fit, where I find energy, where I can solve the most challenging problems for the company. And that will probably be across multiple spaces. It may be in an HR business partner role. It may be in more of an enterprise role. It may be in a center of excellence role. And I want to keep myself flexible across those, but that's me personally. And I see my peers making really, really different decisions based on their development plans.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. Okay, our last question for the panel, and then we might have time for one or two audience questions. We'll see. But our last question is for Chandler and then Jasmine. What strategies did you utilize to prepare for MBA level interviews in your field as we think about, recruitment and that whole process? Are there any specific strategies you would give to our attendees today?
First of all, that practice makes it better. So I did a lot of mock interviews and mock cases, both in the role of an interviewee and as an interviewer, to learn from both sides. You really learn by doing and identify what's my actionable feedback to follow through on. I also did that by leveraging my network. So there was an incredible Michigan Ross alumni at J&J who I tell her all the time, she's my guardian angel. She not only mock interviewed and cased me, but she made herself available to answer my questions, no matter how big or small, to chat through my decision. So really identify if someone can be that advocate for you. And on my end, I had to stay really organized. So I had a very neurotic Google spreadsheet of which roles was I going for? What's the status of my research, my outreach, my applications, to not drop the ball on anything. I think the biggest thing that'll help you stand out in an interview is doing your research, tailoring all your materials, your resume, your cover letter, your interview bank questions to that role at that company at that point in time. If you can answer all three of those questions, you will really stand out. And for LDPs specifically, I found they were interested in what my short and long-term goals were, but also wanted to make sure I was open to learning and I was flexible. Why else would they invest putting me through a more expensive headcount being in an LDP if I thought I had nothing to develop.
Thank you, Chandler. All right, and Jasmine.
Awesome. Building off of all of Chandler's awesome advice, I would say being on the other side, I would say have a more crisp tell me about yourself. I see with candidates now, like they can go 20 minutes and then it's kind of like you use all of your anecdotes for the later questions. So maybe try to have a little bit more of a crisp like elevator pitch. And then for other, like, because I interviewed across the board, what surprised me the most is that even though I wasn't interviewing for consulting roles, I still had like mini case like interviews. Even specifically for Google for this role now, I had a lot of like HR specific mini scenarios that I had to kind of explain how would I approach it, how would I execute like a benefits program, like different things like that. And so I think being able not necessarily to like fully case, but being able to really, really have a succinct line of thinking on like why you're doing something, what is the impact, how are you thinking about the employee experience, I think really goes a long way. And I had a lot of those questions more than behavioral questions. So I think just preparing for that mix can kind of help you get off on the right foot.
Great. Thank you all. I think we might have time for one or two questions from the audience. So I'm going to throw a couple out there and then whoever wants to answer. The good thing is I feel like we've kind of been touching on them. You all have done a really good job of touching on the audience questions as they've come up. So that's amazing. So I've seen a theme in the questions about certifications and whether or not MBA students should be focused on that, or at what point in your career should you start thinking about different certifications to add on. And then also another question that I saw, if you graduate with your MBA and you want to go into an HR type of role, but you're not working in necessarily kind of a rotational or a leadership development program, how do you kind of build your career if you want experience in different areas? So anything that anyone wants to say about either of those things, please feel free.
Thinking about if you're not in an LDP, but you want to pivot, you want to rotate, I think you can absolutely craft your own career to be sort of rotational. I have so many leaders I admire that will bounce back and forth between being a strategic HR business partner and a center of excellence, subject matter expertise. Also take advantage, like what opportunities do you already have at school or at work to engage in a stretch assignment, we call them grow gigs here, or work with a mentor to learn from them. And if those opportunities don't exist, how can you craft that for yourself?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit if you're looking internal, right, to move like into an HR role internally, or if you're looking a little more externally. But either way, I think that like all that advice from Chandler absolutely holds true. And also the other build is the way that I often see people get into HR is through the area where they're already a subject matter expert. So for example, you are in sales, you go into sales learning and development, then you go into sales talent, and then you get that experience and you're able to broaden across HR. And so I see a lot of that movement, especially into talent and learning and development, because you already know that area so well, you're really, really easily able to speak to it. So don't forget the skills that you have and whatever function you have that actually may benefit you into getting into an HR role. On certifications, maybe a hot take, but I would say a lot of the leaders I talk to are like, you don't really need them, particularly if you've already gone through an MBA program, you have a master's. There's so much of this that you can learn, and so I would consult the leaders around you, look up to leaders around you, see what they have. I was like, maybe that's a little bit of a hot take, but that's generally the advice that I've gotten from my mentors. And
Seems like everyone is kind of agreeing with
nodding,
you on
yeah.
that. So yeah. Anything else that anyone wants to add on either of those topics? Last minute thoughts. All right.
Yes, I was
yes.
quickly add. I did not. I went into the corporate HR route, but did not do an HR type of leadership development program. I was more of a direct admit to my team. But that being said, I'm in the tech industry, which is constantly evolving. And I would say it's common for people to be shifting around roles like every year. So, like Jasmine said earlier, like you own your own career journey. So I feel like I'm kind of building my own rotation program if I am, reflecting on that. So again, like you are the owner of whichever direction you want to go in, and you can kind of flip back and forth. But yeah, I would say similar to what everyone else has been chiming in about, like just own what is the best path for you.
Great. I think that's a really nice note to end on. So thank you all so much. I'm going to share my screen again here. So unfortunately, we're out of time. I wish we could keep going with audience questions, but thank you so much to all of our participants today who have asked thoughtful questions throughout the session. And a big thank you again to our panelists for sharing their expertise, their experiences, their background with our audience today. So attendees, we hope you enjoyed this session. Please follow us on our social media platforms and visit our website for even more helpful information on different careers and professional development topics. There's so many great resources for you to explore. I hope everyone enjoyed this session today. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all for your time.